everybody. I'm here down in Cape Canaveral, Florida for the ASQ conference on collaboration in quality for the space and defense industries. And it's my pleasure to be able to interview Kevin Beard of NQA USA Incorporated. Kevin is the president of this registrar, and he's going to give us lots of insights on what to expect with AS9100 going forward. Kevin, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Great to be here.
So my first question for you, Kevin, is now that we've made this transition to AS9100 Revision D, where do we go from here? What are the current expectations?
Well, first off, it starts out with what was the goal of the transition? If you look at any standards evolution, and is really about improving the supply chain. And so the standard, this whole transition isn't necessarily about compliance, but it's about, did we evolve the supply chain? We had some great successes. The industry had 20,000 certificates, and 99.9% of the customers made it through the transition. So there was some great accomplishments there. The challenge is, though, are we done yet? Is there more to do? And what we've learned with different standard transitions over the years is that there's a life cycle that takes place. There's industry challenges, that need to get understood, they need to get incorporated in the standard, there's knowledge and awareness dissemination to all the user organizations, and then the transition takes place. And what we find is that when companies go through this transition, some of them really understand everything that the standard writers are getting at, and they understand how to solve it. But quite often, some of them are just limping across the finish line to get there, and they may not fully have optimized their management system around that. And we've seen this in a couple different major transitions that you're familiar with. In the 9001-2000 standard went through a transition, bringing in the process model, and in 2009, the AS9100's last revision, they brought in risk, operational risk, critical items, things like that. And it took years after the transition was completed for them to get better. And so what we're to fully get it and understand it. So we're in that, where the standard finished their transition in September of last year, we're in an optimization phase where we're trying to take those companies that just barely got across the finish line and evolve them to that next level. And if you go to the slides, you'll see some data that we got from the transition period from the 20,000 companies that are certified worldwide, all the non-conformances. And with those non-conformances, what we found is all the findings are being written in the old areas of the standard, the things that have been around for years, not the new areas. Not the new areas, such as counterfeit parts, raw material testing, product obsolescence, escape prevention, sub-tier supplier management. All those areas are not, you see in the data, they don't get a lot of issue. There's not a lot of issues. So, there's challenges on the supply chain side as well as the certification side, and making sure we're focused in those areas. Now, the challenge that we're seeing in that is that these are the more complex areas of the standards. The things that have a bit more nuance and really have it can be confusing to some suppliers. So that's really where the transition has kind of focused on at this point.
So do you think it's more so because everyone's comfortable with the traditional sections of the standard, and that's why the findings were residing where they were?
That was our primary conclusion, that everyone went to their comfort zone and didn't necessarily go after those more challenging and complex areas that are really the areas the industry needs the supply chain to focus on.
So it's really a maturation process at this point.
Yeah, and so what we're seeing in that maturation process is like, where do we go from here? And so with that, the industry needs to kind of focus on a couple real primary things. If you look at the new standard, it has three big components to it. One is the requirements, and the requirements are not written as standalone requirements. They're more connective and interactive, and I don't think a lot of the users of the standard understand that. So the connectivity and interactive part is important. The idea of outcomes matter. What the industry is really concerned about is, are the suppliers delivering good product to their customers? are the internal processes efficient and effective, and are the outcomes of those processes effective? And the third part of it is risk-based thinking. That's a new part of the standard, and quite often we believe that the industry, the companies are using risk-based thinking at these higher levels of the management system, and they don't really bring it down to every single point in the process where decisions are made, and those are the big areas that need to get the focus on.
So is that the main concern and expectation of the aerospace, space, and defense industry experts?
Yes, and what we're seeing in that is, there's two different parts of it. Is when the standard writers write the standard, they got two different choices. One is they take these complex topics and put them in one big motherhood type statement and put it up in the planning section. The pro to that is that everyone understands it. The con is they don't know where to apply it in the other parts of the detailed areas of the standard. The other aspect is you take that big requirement and you break it up in a lot of little pieces and you sprinkle it across the standard. The benefit is that people know where it is and where it applies, but they don't see the big picture. And so these threads that are built in the standard aren't well understood. And then if they're not understood, they can't have a risk-based thinking applied to them in a way that would prevent negative outcomes from happening.
So how quickly do you think folks can get up to speed, and what are some of the methods to help them kind of see the light?
Well, I'll answer the second part of that question first, in that the methods are really oriented towards understanding the threads, and how these things are connected, and then understand where data comes from outcomes. And the standard has this other very important component to it on prevention, and it comes to the idea of the words occurrence and recurrence. And so occurrence is you want to prevent something future state from happening. Recurrence is something's already happened and you want to prevent it from reoccurring. And so the occurrence issue is really, it's important to understand the threads, how these different requirements of the standard are connected and interactive. And so you can apply risk-based thinking to something to prevent something from happening in the future. Recurrence is really focused on something did happen, something negative did happen. You had a bad product delivered to the customer, you had an escape across your process and it was caught downstream and it's costly to fix it. And so you got to use that outcome data to focus on the risk-based decisions on what do we change so it doesn't recur again. Those two things are really important to focus on, and it all based off of idea of understanding the connective requirements of the standard and applying risk-based thinking to them. The first part of your question was how long it'll take. It could take a while because these type of changes across a broad and deep supply chain, international supply chain, can take time. But the real goal of the industry should be to try to accelerate it. We know this phase exists, and how do we accelerate our way through this phase to ensure that the industry performs to the end users' needs.
Okay, and so have they had any discussion about how to promote the escalation or the acceleration of this process?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a member of the space and defense forums of the AAQG. We have strategies that we've seen the data, we own the data, we see it, we analyze it. Now it's outreach. So part of the reason we're here at the CQSDI is to educate people on what we're seeing. That these are all the major industry players, and we're trying to educate them on what's happening in this industry, and what the data is showing us and where the areas of focus could be within their own supply chains. And the AQG has many of these communication type activities that are planned throughout the year to help create some focus, not only with the top parts of the supply chain, but down into the depths of the supply chain, the certification community that has auditors evaluating this. There's a lot of educational and outreach type of activities taking place to move this along.
So what makes NQA USA different, or what differentiates NQA from the other registrars out in the industry?
Well, what I hope differentiates us is our level of interaction with the industry. We work hand in hand. We're on a lot of the committees, not only in aerospace, but a lot of the other industry sectors, where we try to engage the industry, really understand what those challenges are, and then participate in the solutions of it. And solutions take place not only in standard writing events, but all these public speaking and engagement and, missionary work to push that out there. And so, we start with that part of it, but then it's the transfer of knowledge. Once we understand what this challenges are and the solution needs are, how do we help accelerate the industry's supply chain improvement by taking this knowledge and moving it to our customers that can use it to not only improve themselves, but help meet their customers' needs also.
And I also noticed about NQA that you provide webinars, white papers, training to the clients, informational training. So you really, really are very serious about this outreach process.
It's all part, it's a way to get the supply chain better is to take the knowledge and transfer it.
Very good. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been my pleasure to have you here.
Great to talk with you.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.